Hola mi gente, this is Maddie's Mundo, and today is going to be a little bit of a different video for you all, because in today's video I want to talk a little bit about my personal experience teaching English in Spain, how I did it, what program I went with, and why I chose to even go to Spain in the first place. So stick around while we talk about my experience being an English teacher in España. So one of the best things that I think that I've ever done with my time in my life is deciding to be an English teacher in Spain. To give a little bit of background about my experience being a teacher in Spain, I actually studied Spanish for my degree in university. I went to a school in San Diego, California, and part of my program for my Spanish major was actually moving to Spain to learn alongside Spanish students in a Spanish university. That was really my first experience living and experiencing the life in Spain. I ended up moving to a city called Sevilla, which is my favorite city, I think, in the whole world, and I had a wonderful experience. Unfortunately, though, my experience was cut short because of the pandemic, so I ended up having to move back to California, and after that experience, I decided I really wanted to go back after I graduated college. So fast forward a little bit, after I graduated college, I wanted to figure out how the heck can I move back to Spain for at least a year as somebody who has a Spanish degree from the United States. It was kind of a weird situation. And because I knew that obtaining a work visa or studying another degree wasn't really realistic for me, I decided to do my research and see what options were out there. And that is when I discovered the whole world that is being an English teacher in Spain. Before I get into the specific different programs that are offered for becoming an English teacher in Spain, I also want to talk a little bit about how the Spanish school system works and why there even is this opportunity to become an English teacher there. So in Spain, there are two kind of main school systems and one that's a little bit like an in-between. So there's public school and there's private school, similar to how we have here in the US. However, private school in Spain, I would say, is a lot more common than it is in the US, for example. An important thing to know is that some programs that will send you as an English teacher to Spain do solely work with public schools, some only work with private schools, and some work with both. So it's important to know that before you go into your experience, because there is a little bit of a difference between how public schools and how private schools in Spain are ran. What's great about Spain is that they do value a lot, especially with this generation, teaching the next generation of Spaniards English, which is why a lot of these programs exist, as they allow people from native English-speaking countries to go work in Spanish schools and help students understand how to say things more colloquially, how to speak more fluently, as well as get in some conversation practice with people who are really from an English-speaking country. So before I get into the specifics of what the day-to-day looks like as an English teacher in Spain, I want to talk a little bit about the differences between a couple of different programs and the one that I chose. The first main program that's probably the most popular is called NALCAP, N-A-L-C-A-P, and this program generally works with public schools. Now, NALCAP is great because it offers schools that are all across Spain, whereas some other programs are more in certain areas. What's great about NALCAP is that it's offered in pretty much every single region of Spain. So if there's a certain area that you're really looking towards moving to in Spain, for example, if I wanted to go to Andalusia, I would be able to go probably somewhere near there if I apply with NALCAP. That's the good part about NALCAP. The only complaints that I've personally heard about NALCAP are a couple of things. Number one, the program is so popular that it does tend to be a little bit more disorganized. Because it is ran through the government rather than a private company, your support once you get your placement or your support once you arrive to Spain is probably not going to be as much as if you apply through another private program that works with private schools. I also know that NALCAP, compared to some of the private programs, does pay a little bit less. However, you do work less hours than you do generally with private programs, because the government ran program is a little bit more strict about making sure that you're not working more than the specified amount of hours that you're supposed to work per week while working in Spain. The other complaint that I've heard about NALCAP is that NALCAP tends to roll out its acceptances to the program a lot later than other private companies would, so you have to be a little bit prepared to kind of plan your move to Spain a little bit last minute if you're going to go with NALCAP. Next, the other type of program that exists to teach English in Spain are the different private programs. I can't speak to all of them because I only know the one that I went with, but in my experience, I went with a company called Medeas. Now, Medeas generally works with private schools and is a program that I chose for a couple different reasons. Number one, I really liked Medeas because Medeas gave me my acceptance to Spain a lot earlier than NAUCAP would have. So I knew at about March where I was going, what city I would be sent to, and all of the information about my trip several months in advance so that I could plan in time for my move to Spain. Medeas also provided a lot of support and a lot of information on how to apply for your visa, how to apply for your paperwork once you get to Spain, how to find housing, and things like that. So what's great about Medeas is that they do support you a little bit more along your journey of something really intimidating like moving to a new country. Now moving on to a couple of the cons regarding my experience with Medeas. Number one, Medeas does require you to take more of a class than the NAUCAP government program would. So because you're going on to Spain technically on a student visa, you are required through certain private programs to take a university course that you don't have to pay for. However, you do need to complete in order to get your deposit back at the end of your year. With Medeas, you have to pay a certain amount of money before you enter the program. That's basically just saying that you're going to finish it so that you don't drop out in the middle of the year and then leave the school with no teacher. In order to get that deposit back, not only do you have to finish your year, but you also have to pass that course that you have to take online through a local Spanish university. Now, the class is really easy. It's basically just teaching you how to be a teacher. So if you don't have any experience working with teenagers or working with kids, it can definitely be helpful to give you a little bit of support on your experience teaching English. However, sometimes these classes could be annoying as they were required for you to attend, and sometimes it would be on like a Friday when you really just want to relax from your long week of teaching at school. My only other complaint about Medeas is that many schools don't necessarily follow the rules about how many hours you're supposed to teach per week. Sometimes they'll compensate you by doing things like paying for your transportation, for example, or giving you free food at your school, but a lot of them do have you working more hours than you're technically supposed to, which I guess that's why you're going to Spain in the first place. So hopefully you're okay with that, but definitely in my case, I did end up working a little bit more hours than I was supposed to at my school, but because I loved them so much, it was worth it. Now that I've discussed a little bit of information regarding the main programs that you can see when moving to Spain, I want to talk about my actual experience, where I was sent, and how my year was. For my program, there were a couple of different tiers that you could go in on, but my tier was for somebody who had a college degree. I know that not all programs require you to have a college degree, but some will pay more or less per month depending on if you have a degree or not. Because I had a degree, I was gifted the opportunity to be able to teach a very large range of students. So I was personally sent to Madrid, Spain. However, I wasn't sent to the actual city of Madrid. I was sent to a suburb about 30 minutes outside of Madrid. So because of that, it created an interesting experience for me, being that I still wanted to live in the city even though I worked outside of the city. So every single day I actually commuted about 40 minutes to get to my school. I had to take a bus and then a train and then walk for about 15 more minutes to actually arrive to my school, which was definitely a challenge on some cold mornings in the Madrid winter. I was actually placed with students all the way from first grade to seniors in high school. So that was also an interesting experience because every single class that I went to, I was doing something completely different with my students. Generally in the morning, I was with the middle schoolers and the high schoolers, and then in the afternoon, I was with the small children. My school was also pretty unique because it was extremely small. To put into perspective, my high school in the United States had 3,000 people just for the last 4 years. Now, my school that I worked at in Spain, from preschool all the way to senior year, only had 800 students. So you can imagine that working in a small town at a small school where all of the teachers were either the parents of the students or married to each other, it was definitely a little bit of a unique experience being in such a small environment. And walking into that in a country like Spain at first was definitely a little bit intimidating because the culture of Spain is so family oriented and so community oriented. Walking into such a tight-knit community, I definitely didn't know what to expect. Luckily, because I speak Spanish, for me, it was a little bit easier to integrate myself into those groups of people. However, if you don't speak Spanish, this might be a little bit of a challenge if you're placed in a really small school in a small town of Spain. I walked into this year teaching in Spain having no idea what to expect. All I knew is that I worked in a small town and my school was small and that I was teaching all ages. However, at the end of my year, let me tell you, the teachers and the students all became literally my family. It's been 2 years since I've been there, and I still text a lot of them a lot. My students still reach out to me. So for me, it actually turned out being a really good experience teaching in a smaller town of Spain rather than in a big city, which can be a little bit more intimidating in terms of how the school's vibe is. Now, to talk a little bit about what the actual job of being a teacher in Spain looks like, I'll share my own personal experience, but one important thing to know is that everybody has a completely different experience teaching English in Spain. You might watch one video and people are going to be telling you that it was this way, and another one people are going to tell you it was a completely different way. And that's really important to understand, that my experience that I had in Spain is probably not going to be the way that you're going to experience it, although it might be similar. At my specific school in Spain, I was given a couple of main tasks. The first one was that I was, before anything, a conversation teacher. So for a lot of my classes, I would come in and basically teach the students to talk. I didn't have to give any certain subjects. I didn't have to teach things like math or science or health, for example. All I had to do was show up and talk. Now, I do know that some of my friends while I was there, however, had a completely different experience where they were teaching subjects in English, so be prepared that you might have to do this as well. What was great about the fact that I was a conversation teacher is that I had a lot of freedom of what I could do with my students. So with each class in my school, I had 2 different classes with them. One was Maddie's class, my class, and I got to do whatever I wanted with them for a whole hour, which was really fun. So the main teacher would be in the room with me, but I was basically in charge of the space for a whole hour, which, again, if you have no experience teaching or no experience with students, this might be a little bit intimidating at first because you really do need to learn how to make something work for a whole hour with people who are still kids and teenagers. At the end of the day, just because they're Spanish doesn't mean that you have any different challenges than you would being a teacher here in the US. You also have to be prepared to have a lot of patience and a lot of organization going into the year. My specific classes, because I worked with so many different levels of students, looked really different for each one. Sometimes I would do role playing with them where we would practice certain situations like ordering food or going to the airport, whereas with other ones it was more just learning basic vocabulary, practicing listening comprehension, reading stories, and things like that. Now, in the second type of class that I did with my students, this was where I would just walk around and be basically the equivalent of a teacher aide, but in English. So I would sit through classes of math, I would sit through classes of science, of technology, of art, and basically my job was to walk around and talk to the students about whatever they were doing or whatever subject they wanted to talk about. These types of classes were really fun for me, A, because I didn't have to do as much work, but B, because it really gave me the chance to get to know the people that I was working with. I became really close with my students at this time because they shared a lot with me. I would sit down, I would talk with them about whatever they were capable of talking about, and it was really, really fun. These were the times that really made me feel like my students were my family. They really took me in and they really accepted me as sort of a big sister role. Being that I was only a few years older than them, it was kind of an interesting dynamic. Another great thing about working at my school is that I also had one other language assistant there that I ended up getting super close with. It was really fun because there were only 2 of us at the whole school that were native English speakers, so you could imagine the amount of times that we hung out every single day. So what's fun is if you do get placed in a school with some other cool language assistants, it's also a really great way to make friends. Now, I also wanted to talk about a few of the things that I maybe didn't so much like about my experience, or things that were a little bit tricky about my year as well. Number one was the fact that, like I said before, you're dealing with students of all ages. So just because they're from Spain or just because you're teaching them English doesn't mean that you're gonna have to stop dealing with things like fights between students yelling and being loud all the time, angry teenagers, angsty kids, drama. All of the things that you've probably seen or you've probably experienced in a middle or high school environment is also going to happen as you're a teacher in Spain. So you have to be prepared for the fact that not only are you teaching English, but you're also an authority figure at the end of the day. There were many times that I had to pull students outside. I had to confront them about tricky situations, and that's something that not everyone is necessarily prepared for. It's important that you walk into the year knowing that your job is to teach English, but your real first job is to be a figure of authority and trust for these students. The second difficult part of my job was definitely the commute to school every day. Like I said before, I decided to live in the city but work in a small town outside of the city. So every day I had to leave about an hour before I actually needed to start to get to school on time. Lastly, in this video, I want to talk about how the pay looks like while you're working in Spain. It is important to remember that the visa that you are on while you're working in Spain is technically a student visa. So although you are getting paid for your basic necessities, I wouldn't say that you should expect to really get enough money to save. With the program that I went with, I was getting about 1,100 euros per month, which is the equivalent of about $1,000. It's important to know that this money actually pretty much covered everything that I needed to buy. My rent was only about 400 euros a month, my food didn't cost very much, and my transportation was only 20 euros a month. So although the money wasn't much, it definitely did cover my basic necessities. Now, if you do plan on traveling or on using that money for fun things besides just living, I definitely recommend looking into the opportunity of teaching private classes outside of school, which I actually chose to do. So about 4 to 5 times a week after school, I taught a few classes to students, which I was able to charge whatever rate I wanted to charge for to make some extra money on the side. This did make for very long days, so be prepared that if you choose to do this, you're probably not going to have a lot of time Monday through Friday to enjoy yourself after work. However, the money was really great in terms of helping me out with some travel that I did, as well as buying things beyond just food and rent with my money. Overall, I would like to say that my experience working and living in Spain was amazing. I would not trade it for anything in the world. My students, even to this day, still talk to me. I love every single one of them. I had such a great year, and it really made me feel like I was part of a family there in Spain. If you're thinking about being a teacher in Spain, I will say definitely do your research. Look a lot into the programs, look a lot into how much you're going to get paid, and really think about where you want to be placed. Lastly, it's important that you go into your experience teaching in Spain with a really open mind. Some of the experiences that you're going to have while you're there will be difficult. You're in a foreign country, and not only that, but you're working. So sometimes when you hit those points of exhaustion, it's really important to understand that you're here for a reason and that you should keep your mind open while you're experiencing your time in Spain. If you guys have any questions about my experience teaching in Spain, or if you have any suggestions for the people in the comments for things to look into, definitely leave it here. And thank you so much for watching my video today. Ciao!